hello, Margaret. How are you?
Good. How are you, Rich?
Good. How's everything going?
Good.
How's
Good.
Chip?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. How's Chip doing?
Good. Working.
Tell him I said thank you for the sweatshirt.
I will.
I love it. Oh, so what's going on?
Not much. Start of a new year, new thoughts, new trajectory. You review what you did in the past and then make corrections going forward.
What does it look like? How was your 2024?
Well, it was funny, and I think I said this to you last year when we did the award ceremony. I'm like, well, I got in the room because the market was so hard and there was so much struggles, and I think there was so much negativity on changes that were being made that a lot of agents, especially when you have the amount of experience that I have, decided, do I want to continue to do this or do I want to get out? So to me, if I just got into the room, it was good enough.
I'm just happy with getting into the room.
Yeah.
So tell me about yourself. Like when did you start real estate? Like where'd you grow up? Let's start with that. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Merrick.
Okay.
Fast forward, I went to high school. It's now Kellenberg in Uniondale. It was Maria Regina when I went.
Okay.
And then I went to St. John's University for business management.
Did you graduate?
I did.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
What,
So, and I was thinking when I was driving here, it was so different then because I only applied to one college. It's not like kids do today where they apply to 20. I don't know what the plan was if I didn't get in because there was no plan B. but I did get in. And then businesses used to come on campus when you were graduating to interview you, and that's how I got my job. I got a job on Wall Street.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So you went to St. John's and then went to Wall Street. When you went to St. John's, was like JPODs around and all the bars across the street?
Yes.
That was all going?
Yes. In fact, I'm trying to think of the name of the bar now. That's how I met my husband because people from St. John's used to hang out on Union Turnpike
Yep.
or I can't think of the name of the bar close to New Hyde Park, and that's exactly where I met Chip.
Dublin Pub?
Yes.
Yes.
That's where we met.
That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
But the cool thing was is when you went there, you weren't there by yourself.
Yeah,
like,
of course not.
You walked through the door and you knew people that were going to be there.
That's right.
You know?
That was a great bar. That closed down, I think, in, early 2000s?
Yeah. I think they made it a warehouse or something now.
Yeah, that was a pretty good place. That was a fun place.
Yes.
Actually, yeah, early 2000, because when I was a police officer in the academy, we used to go there.
Well, and the funny part is the driver's licenses, we didn't have pictures. You just had brown hair and brown eyes and your height. So I would switch with my girlfriend because she was younger than me. So she would get in with my ID, and then I would get stopped.
That's hysterical. I got a lot of funny stories in that place. Oof, a lot of funny stories I can't say on the air.
Yeah.
Especially when I was a police officer, we did some wild shit. So
It was but you're right, it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. It was a big
Different
cop
world.
fireman bar, and everybody's hanging out. Everybody was young and just having a blast. And then from there, you went to all the other clubs on Long Island. I remember we all started at Dublin Pub, though.
And what was cool, too, is when you hung out with people, you watched out for each other.
That's right.
You know? Yeah. It's like nobody went home with somebody else. It's like the group you came with, they made sure you got home okay.
That's right.
It was different.
I can tell you stories off the air. We had a lot of fun in that place. It was a good time. It was a big cop hangout, especially Academy. A lot of the guys from the Academy would go to. We would see the ICO, basically, for the Academy going in there, and we would all be terrified because, we didn't want them to know we were on the job.
Right.
Because you couldn't get in trouble when you were in the academy, and he would just, Mr. Reese, Sergeant Reese was the guy's name. And he was a prick until we started hanging out with him, and then he was a really good guy.
Yeah.
So when we were off duty, he was pretty cool. But a lot of good memories there. And then it was funny, I almost bought the building across the street, that office building that went up that's been vacant for a long time. I almost bought that across the street from the Dublin Pub in probably 2012, 2013. Mm-hmm. We were looking at that building.
Wow.
And should have bought it back then. I think it was a Mill 5 in, whatever year it was.
It's funny when you talk about prices. Even before I came for this interview, I was curious. I'm like, what the heck did I pay for my house and how long do I own it? I bought my house in 2003 and I paid $329.
Wow.
Is that crazy?
$329. And if you don't mind me asking, what do you think it's worth? Like, how much did it double, triple?
I just have one on the contract. I live in Massapequa, and we put it on the contract for $674.
Okay.
So that was a good investment.
It's a very good investment.
Yeah. And I remember when I bought my house, I was scared to death. You're like, can you make these payments? But the funny part is when I got out of St. John's and I got my first job on Wall Street, my salary was $18,000 a year.
On Wall Street. So
That
what
was my
did you
starting
do on
salary.
Wall Street?
I was a margin analyst.
Tell me what that is.
So I worked down at 1 State Street, back office operations. I actually worked during the crash when the computers were triggering the sales. I was in the market then. And then it was very much a man's world. So when I started training there, they put me with a guy, and his name was Mario, funny guy. And for 2 weeks, then my manager called me in, and he goes, "How are you doing with training?" And I go, "I know the alphabet really good. What's next?" Because all I would do was his files.
Okay.
You know, so then they moved me. I knew enough from his training. They gave me my own offices to monitor. So I had one on Fifth Avenue and I had one in Toms River, New Jersey.
Oh, pretty
So
cool.
I would do the margin calls. We would flip through these sheets, blue sheets,
I remember. Yep.
with the rubber fingers every day, flipping through the accounts to see who was going on a margin call. Yep.
How many people didn't pay up on those margin calls?
When the market crashed, we were mandated in at 5:30 in the morning. I got on the trains with the construction workers.
Wow.
Yeah, it was massive overtime. And then, of course, if you got audits from the SEC or the New York Stock Exchange, I used to work weekends downtown. I would go in on the trains, by myself, and it was desolate down there. Like the restaurants didn't even open.
Yep. Wow.
You know.
So that's what year? 2003, 2004, 2008?
I graduated St. John's in '86,
Okay.
and I had my first kid at '89, and that's when that ended. So I was late '80s.
Late 80s that was going on. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, so that was the first
Yep.
first crash.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's when the rates were still like in the 15s, right? In the
Yeah.
13s?
Yeah.
'Cause I remember looking at a co-op in the late 80s when I was 19, 20.
And again, the vibe down there working on Wall Street was fun. We got paid once every 2 weeks, so you would go to the South Street Seaport to hang out. You didn't go home and hang out. You would hang out in the city.
That's right.
We would go to the World Trade Center. They would have outdoor concerts. So I loved it.
So you left in 89
'89, yeah.
and then had the baby.
Yes.
Not
yes.
a baby anymore, but
No. Well, and the funny part is I was taking classes. I actually took my Series 7. I didn't pass the test the first time. I missed it by a couple
it was a hard
points.
test. Yeah.
Brutal.
It was a hard test, yeah.
And the whole thing, my confusion was calls and puts. That was the options. I didn't get that stuff.
Yep.
But I was expecting, and my son now works in the finance field, so I told him I put him through his initial training.
There you go. That's right. That's funny. That is funny. How did you ever talk to him about like what it was like when you were doing it compared to today?
Yes. Yeah, and you know what? It's even back then it was a high stress position, but it was so rewarding. Even too, and it's now even doing real estate. I'm so compliance oriented. I think because of that training, like we would have the FBI come up and take people out in handcuffs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even back then.
Yeah. In fact, they would have me escort people down to the doors downstairs, and then I would take their ID badges.
Wow.
Yeah. So because people would be checked.
How often did that happen?
Twice. In the 3 years I was there, I saw the FBI come up twice.
And what was that for, like insider trading?
Yeah,
just
they were
margins or-
laundering money through accounts. The cashier in my Toms River, New Jersey office was doing something funky. So thank God I kept good enough records because then they think, if you're running this office, are you in on it?
Interesting.
Yeah, so we would do, that's why I'm,
You're so compliant. Yeah,
I am-
you
I'm-
are. Oh my God. Yeah.
Well-
Which is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. It's just between you and Karen, oof, it's it's
you
a
know
lot of
what?
compliance, which is good. Is that where it's from though?
yes, I think that because I was scared stiff. Like when you're in that kind of environment, I'm like, they're not playing games.
Especially back then, you don't really see people getting locked up, I guess.
Yeah, no. Yep, nope. And when the New York Stock Exchange would come up to do the audits, in fact, it's funny, the company my son works for now, they're going through audits. So I'm like, oh yeah, I remember those days. And I think too, as a girl then, back in the mid 80s, you felt like you had to prove yourself a little bit more because it was definitely a man's environment.
So explain that to me. What was that like?
I was very humbled when I started there because I felt like, and I think people miss that now working in the city. The vice presidents, the CEOs would walk through the hallways and like you knew who these people were. And I was just in awe. It's like, how do you get to that level? I feel bad now for people that choose to work from home because, one of my sons is in tech and he works from home, in a support position. And I'm like, well, who did you meet in your living room today?
That's right, yeah. It's so funny you said
So there was always a drive to do better or there was a trajectory. And I went in because I majored in management at St. John's. So I went in as a management trainee. I didn't start from scratch and work my way up. I was low-level management as soon as I started.
And when you were there, but you said it was you know, you're working in a man's world back then. It's still the 80s. You'd think
Yep.
that would have changed by then, but it didn't, right?
Yeah, well, it was funny. Even when we interviewed, and they would tell us if you were engaged or married, take your rings off.
Wow.
Because people didn't think you were serious. They thought you were going to have kids, and why bother training you for such a long period of time, and then you're not staying? Like, was the
And
thought
that's
process.
exactly what you did.
Yeah, yeah, I know. You're like, damn, they were right. So after being a margin analyst, I started with E.F. Hutton, and we were taken over by Shears and Lehman.
Remember E.F. Hutton? Wow.
Yeah,
Was
that's
it when they spoke, you
yes.
listened, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
funny.
So Shears and Lehman took us over, and because I was just a margin analyst, I knew my job was safe. So I actually got moved up to an assistant ops management office at 599 Lexington Avenue.
Wow. That's pretty
So
cool.
there was two managers. One, you had to have your Series 7, and then there was an ops manager, and I was the assistant to the ops manager.
What did you need to have with the ops manager? You have to have the 7, or you didn't have to have it?
That's why I took it. So then, too, you could move around more within
What was
the
it,
office.
7 and there's 63 or 60?
Yeah,
you got both of them, right?
I was just taking the 7.
'Cause the other one was the insurance you had to have, right?
Yes.
If you wanted to be a trader?
Yep.
You had to have a 7 and a 63 or something like that, I think. I forgot what the
I
number
think it was a
was.
63 series.
That's what it was,
But
huh?
that was interesting, too, because when I got moved up to a branch at 599 Lexington Avenue, I was in the office with the traders. And if there was illegal trading or we didn't have money in the account before they did it, I got to visit their office and bust the trades out.
Really?
Yeah.
What was
So
that like?
it
That
was
must have been
fun.
interesting. Yeah, that had to be pretty cool.
It was fun, you know, and like sometimes I'd say to them, okay, get the check in here by 5 o'clock and then we'll let it sit, you
Yep.
know, and again, your reputation always precedes you. I stuck to it. If you didn't do what I asked, I was busting your trades
But did
out.
you have to because of the position that you were in, you
Yes.
think? Or
Yeah.
because you had to prove that you had
Yeah.
to be as tough or whatever
Yeah,
it
'cause,
was?
The one thing about being in the finance field and corporate America is there was 10 people waiting for your job. It wasn't like
scary.
you were so safe that you couldn't be touched. I watched people get taken out and arrested. I watched people get fired, you know? So no matter what they put me on, I always excelled at it. And I used to do check reconciliation for the branch. They said when I took the position over, it was the first time the accounts were balanced, because it would annoy me if I had 3 cents and where did it come from? Like it was that detailed work. I would sign the checks for the branches,
Okay.
you know? And I remember one time my boss was out and they had me sit in her office. I thought I was going to have a heart attack because I'm a good support person, but I don't think I like to be the
Don't
main
like to lead.
person.
No.
You could do it for a little bit, but the stress level, and of course the damn computers went down that day.
That's funny.
So you have an office of 60 brokers with no computers. They're not happy.
And again, this is the 80s, too. This
Yes.
isn't when computers were really, everything was by ticket back then, too, right?
Right. Yep. Yep.
And then what did the computers do?
Well, I found the phone number quickly to back office operations downtown. I was uptown then, and we got the computers back up and running. So, but if they
But
didn't,
what were the computers for back then? Was it just to log
for
information
the
in?
trading, monitoring the accounts, yeah.
Just monitoring the accounts and just getting it quicker than...
Yep. Yep. And we would do the reports every day at the end of the day to make sure whatever trades we had, the checks were there for. We would book the checks in, and then they would have somebody come. They would go in a zippered bag, and then they would take it downtown to back office operations.
It kind of reminds me of like one of my first jobs. I think I was just starting school, college, John Jay. And I was working for one of the banks. I think it was either B of A or Chase or one of them. And what I did at the end of the day, I remember having to go in at like 5 o'clock at night, and I had to work till like 11. So it was after school and then going into to the city. And I was downtown in the financial district. Never had any desire to be a finance guy, but it was a good job, and I got it through school, so I went and did it. And I remember my job was, I guess it was sort of like reconciling the accounts, but I just had to make sure the account numbers matched up with the actual check.
Right.
It was weird how they did it. So I remember there was just a whole room of, people doing the same exact jobs, and it was just, I remember bags of checks just coming in.
Yep.
And I guess we did the whole city. I guess it was each person had their own like branch they had to take care of, and you were, they split you up every night so you didn't screw around with the checks, and you couldn't become friends with any of the tellers. It was a weird, position, but it was interesting.
Back then it was much more hands-on with people. everything wasn't computer generated.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think the people back then told the computers what to do.
That's what I did. I actually had to
Yep.
put it into the computer. So you had a machine, I guess, a computer, right? And you typed in the numbers on the computer, and then if it matched up, it would print them on the bottom of the check.
Oh, okay.
If it didn't match up, it would spit
Kick
it
it
back
back.
and
Yep.
say this is not a valid check or whatever it would be. And I can't remember, you're talking about 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? 30 years ago, at least 35 years ago. So, and I was probably drunk half the time because I was a teenage kid, going to work after school.
Oh, right, right, yep.
So, but again, really interesting how times changed with these computers and how everything is so much easier today than back then. But I still say it was so much easier to make money back in the 80s than it is today, I believe.
Yeah, and like you said, the systems, it was mundane. You did the same thing all the time.
Yeah, it was just,
But you realized the systems worked because you could process things quicker because we had the same routine every day when we
So-
came in. You were doing the exact same thing. So I think there's something said about that, especially too now with the technology. And I just said that the other day. I did the first class for January, and I said that it's like if you're bored, you're doing it right.
yeah, that's a good point.
You know,
It's a very
it's
good
like
point.
it's do the same thing every day. Putting in your stuff and then deciphering the output.
So it's funny you said that too. When I used to lead gen, Eddie Lee used to come into my office all the time when we were in Bayside, and he'd be like, God, you say the same thing over and over. That's all you do all
Yep.
day. Hi, this is Rich Amato. I'm from Keller Williams. I saw you listing at 123 Sesame Street, just expired. What happened? 10 minutes later, I'm on the next call. Hi, this is Richard Amato from Keller Williams at 123 Sesame, yada, yada, yada. And Eddie would just sit there, and it's like the same conversation constantly happening. And he used to say to me, why don't you change it up?
Right.
And I used to say to Eddie, why would I change it up if it works? Fast forward, a couple of years later, I was fortunate to get into a relationship with Mariano. And one of the questions I asked Mo was, like everybody else, I said, I'm sure you get this question all the time. Why don't you come up with another pitch? And his response was similar to what I said to Eddie. Not that we're in the same level at all, but why would I do something why would I change something that works? Why would I give them something that they might be able to hit when they can't hit it?
Right.
So again, repetition is good.
Yes.
And if you're bored, you're right. That means you're making money and you're doing it right.
And the systems work. So there's a balance because you don't want to become so systematized that you become complacent.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing is that when something's off, I can recognize it right away because it's off. It's not fitting into the way I do things.
Yep.
You know?
Well, so okay, so you're 89. You're in downtown, the financial district. You're blessed with the first. Take me through that process now. You stopped working, hanging out.
My husband had his own business it was a family business. So I stayed home. He worked 7 days a week. When you have your own business, there's no time off. And he was in the wedding business, so he worked weekends.
Okay.
Which is good because all of his experience was okay with me working weekends because we both understood this is what you need to do.
Sure.
So because I think I'm doing this now I'm going on 28 years.
Wow.
A lot of people don't last that long in this business.
No, they don't.
So you need.
So you started in the 90s.
97. Yeah, 97 I got my license.
Okay.
So I stayed home with my kids. It was a sacrifice. Obviously, when you're going down to one salary, it was a struggle, And it's funny, I just said this to you the other day. It's like I was always the person where if it was enough, I was okay because I just needed to get by with what I needed to do. So my son just started kindergarten, and there was a girl, even too with raising kids, it was different then. I lived in a co-op. It was 2 apartments down, 2 up. All of us had kids, so we would get our stuff done in the morning. After lunch, everybody ate lunch at the same time. Then we would go outside and all the kids would play together. Mm-hmm. So there was one girl at the end of our street that actually worked in a real estate office in Queens, and she said they're looking for part-time help. She said, would you be interested?
Oh, wow.
So my son was starting kindergarten. They went full days. We didn't do preschool then. So even, your kids really went to school at 5, not at 2.
Yep. Remember that, yeah?
So that was different. So I would work up until 2 o'clock. I'd take him to school. I'd go to work part-time, and then I would go get him, and then I would be off the rest of the day again to be home with my kids.
So you a real estate agent, or did you work in the office?
No, this is really funny. So I was a part-time administrator in First Choice, and I worked for
First Choice, wow.
Helen Keat.
You worked for Helen?
I worked for Helen.
That's funny. Okay.
So I laugh now, 28 years later, these people are still in my world.
That's so funny.
So I didn't know anybody else at First Choice. I went to work, I came home. Then I decided, because I was in the environment and I worked downstairs, so I wasn't upstairs with the rest of the agents. And my thoughts when I was a salaried person was that these people will eat their young. Like, they were so aggressive agents. They were good agents, but when I was a people watcher, I'm like, I can't believe people
Well,
are
think
like
of that
this.
group.
Yeah.
Think of that group.
Yeah.
That was a monster group.
It
That
was a
you know,
monster group.
When I came in, I think I came in 2003. They were all at the top of the market. And
Oh, these people didn't play. They were the real deal.
well,
Yeah,
I think
they-
you had Fallen was there, right?
Yes.
You had
Nelly
Judy
and-
Markowitz,
and
Nelly.
Dranko.
Yep, Nelly,
Julia
Judy,
Shilkret.
Julia.
Yep. And Donio.
They were all there.
Yeah.
Everybody in
All
in
on the same
Queens.
roof.
Yeah, it was all under that same world. I remember when were you there when First Choice sold?
No, I was gone then.
Okay, because you were a real estate agent then.
So when I got my license, I decided
When did you get your license?
1997.
Okay, so when did you start working for First Choice, though?
Probably I was there 2 or 3 years working
Okay.
for Helen salaried,
Okay.
and then I decided. So I was going to get my license, and
So Ross was a baby, I guess.
I don't even think I knew him then.
Wow.
Like yeah. I mean, we might be
And his
similar
sister,
in age,
right?
but he was not in the picture at all. It's not like she brought her kids to work or anything like that. I didn't
Okay.
know them then. So I got my license and I was gonna help Helen part time, and then with the environment and I saw the potential in the business, I said, you know what? I was so intimidated to stay there and work with those people
I can imagine.
because they were so good. Like, I figured I would last an hour and then I would be gone.
So where'd you end up?
So I went to Prudential on Bayside on Northern Boulevard.
Prudential and Bayside. Douglas Elliman, obviously.
Yeah, well, then it was Prudential Long Island Realty.
Yep.
Right?
And that's Dottie on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So
This is 97 now.
97.
Okay, so you end up working for Prudential.
I stayed there 2 or 3 years.
Who was in that office at that time?
Donna Reardon ran the office.
Okay. Who was the agents in there? Was it like Maria and Larry?
Maria and
Were they there?
Larry, Martha. Who was the girl? DeFerrari?
I know who you're talking about.
Trudy Hart, Terry
Trudy
Mangello.
Hart was there too. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
So, and it's funny because these people are still doing real
Yeah, they're
estate.
still kicking. It's great.
It's long. So I feel like I had a really good initial experience, a foundation to. It's not like I got frustrated with the business and said, I'm not doing this anymore. I never experienced that.
How did you compete in that element?
I remember when I was at Prudential, being frustrated because I felt like the top agents were always the top agents and I didn't have the opportunity to be like them. I kind of felt like you were labeled in tiers and that I wanted to figure out how to get to the next level.
And the strange thing is, and I'm not strange, I guess. Donna Reardon, I thought she was an awesome person. I thought she was an awesome manager. I never worked for her.
Yeah.
But I always had a great relationship with everybody there
Well,
when I was working.
in hindsight, I know that when I personally get frustrated, I hit a ceiling and I'm frustrated with myself. You only recognize that I didn't know that then. So I worked with one guy. He's still around, not a real estate agent, though we're still friends. And he said to me, he says, I'm going to Remax. Do you want to come with me?
So that wasn't Jack Rothstein. He was there, right? Was Jack Rothstein there?
The
Prudential?
yeah, he might have been there. It was a smaller office. Like, the offices weren't as big as they are now.
Okay.
In those days when you worked, you pretty much knew everybody. So I don't think that Prudential office, I don't even know how many agents we had in there, but it wasn't huge.
Where was that located? Where did they first open?
Northern Boulevard.
Oh, so it was always there on Northern, and then they
yeah.
just moved to Bell, right?
Yes, yeah. It was on Northern. So the guy that I worked with, we were just friends. We weren't a team or anything. And he said, I think I'm going to go to Remax. And it was right across the street. It was Remax Universal. So he said, come with me. I went and I interviewed with him. And I'm not a person for change if I don't need to.
You're like me, yeah.
I was okay staying there, But then I was getting frustrated that I felt like I hit a ceiling and I couldn't do more. So then I decided to go to Remax. The guy that started the process bailed on me.
Oh, wow.
And I went, and then he decided to stay with Prudential. So I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So I stayed in that office a long time, and
So now you're in Universal.
I was in Universal.
Who was in that office?
heavy hitters again, but it had a different culture. So the broker that ran that office was very respectful of everybody. He was a go-getter. He always told me, "Don't worry about the money."
Razak, you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
He's a great guy.
And
Yeah.
and I'm still like that. I don't worry about the money. It's not the money thing first. He says, just do the right thing and learn. And he says, and the money will come. And he was right. If you worked in that office, you were guaranteed to make at least $100,000.
That office was another one, new group.
We were number 2 in New York State
right.
with Remax. I remember it was us and Remax team. We were always the competition.
Right. Team was
Yeah.
in Astoria, right?
Yep.
Or
Yep.
right, Astoria? Or?
Yeah, it was Astoria.
That's right.
Yeah. So, or Jackson Heights.
Jackson Heights it was, yeah.
Yeah. So it would always be Universal or Remax team back and forth with the awards.
Well, the Astoria ones that became Executive Realty, that was a pretty good Remax too back in the day,
Yeah. Yeah.
if I recall.
No, the Remaxes were good offices because whether you made production or not, you were still paying your monthly bill.
Well, Remax was probably the first big company that came in, right?
Yes.
After, then Keller took a piece of Remax and the way I looked at it, and just started its own thing,
Right.
its own world where you had the best of both worlds, where you didn't have to pay the desk fees and
Right.
and all of that.
But the thing with when I was with Remax is because you had that monthly bill, it wasn't new agents. You were dealing
You were
with
dealing with all senior agents.
full-time. It
right.
wasn't dual careers that much. I really don't even remember people doing dual
Well,
careers.
your world was, I think Holly Park was there, right?
Yeah.
Then you
David
had
Tear.
David Tear. He was there when you were there?
Yep.
So
Yep.
David started in the 90s or 2000?
I don't know when he started. Maybe a little bit later than me.
'Cause I just saw recently, I looked at a magazine, he opened up his own Remax now,
Yes.
which I haven't talked to David in so long. God, I hope he's doing well. I'm sure he is. God bless him. He's a good man. I liked him.
Yeah. No, it was a great office, and
was,
it
yeah.
was very like the agents. We weren't cutthroat with each other, and it was funny. I sat outside of Razak's office, so I used to call it sitting outside of the principal's office. If somebody was
Well, his son ran the market center, right? Did his son run the office?
after I left, his son was running the office. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So were you there when Dave Legaz and Lou and everybody was there? Or?
Yes.
Okay, so you were there with that group.
Yes. So I
Did you make
sat.
the jump with them or no?
No. I
Okay.
stayed.
I know what happened.
Yeah, so
just calling you out.
I stayed. So I would sit outside of Razak's office, and he was always so professional and handled himself well, but he always did the right thing. I would hear him call agents into the office if they did something that he wasn't happy about and call them out on it. I watched him tell agents to pack their stuff and leave.
Wow.
So to me, because everybody thinks, sales, you have to be undercut or shady, I watched him do it right. And he was one of the top officers in the area and one of the top officers in New York State. So he was really a great role model to learn from. As far as David and Nancy, they worked for Diana Duarte,
That's right. Yeah.
and I convinced them to come to Remax. So I was there
Wow.
first. Yes.
I did not know that.
Yes.
I thought they would have brought you there.
Well, what happened was when I was with Prudential and they were with Diana Duarte,
I remember when they were with Diane, yeah.
they would go on vacation. We did a transaction together, and every time they went away, they would have me watch their stuff, even though we didn't work for the same company.
That's interesting. Wow.
So they would come back and they'd be like, "Okay, what happened?" And I'd be like, "All your stuff is sold. You have to go get new inventory." And it
That's
was like
awesome.
a joke. So because we trusted each other that much. So when I went to Remax and I was happy there, I convinced Dave and Nancy to come with me. So we worked in that environment for a long time.
So Dave's retired from the job at that point too, right?
I didn't know them as much personally. I would
Okay.
just work on their stuff, but I think he was because they were doing it full time.
Okay.
So I guess he was retired from the job then.
And then was Nancy doing it prior to? I remember this. I don't remember it, but I remember it. Like, was Nancy before Dave? Did she get in the business first, or?
I'm not sure what their story is, but the way I saw it is that Dave was always in the office.
Yeah.
Like he was the one that was always in the office. So I really didn't know who was doing more or less.
Okay. I thought she brought Dave in, and then Dave would be a cop or whatever, and then going into that world afterwards.
Yeah, because I know with Remax, you had to do it as a team. So they were a husband and wife team, and I believe they had to pay 2 desk fees or whatever.
So when I went there, and that's what kept me, it was interesting. When I was debating between Remax and Keller, because I was at America's Bravest, and I was, making my move to go into the bigger company, getting out of the mom and pops. So it was out of Douglas Elliman, Remax, and Keller. And No, I'm lying to you. Well, I went to Exit first. I'm sorry. I went to Exit.
Because Keller wasn't even there
Well,
when
Keller
Remax,
opened up. Yeah, when
Yeah,
Remax
later on.
opened, later
Right.
on it
Yep.
opened up. And I was debating because Dave always tried to get me to go to Remax. And when I went there to interview, it was just me and Diana were working together. But it was like one of us would always work. You know, I don't want to tell you my background or anything like that, but it was, I didn't feel that I should have had to pay 2 desk fees.
Right.
And it came out to something like
It was
3,800.
expensive.
Yeah, it was like $3,800.
Yeah.
And I remember him telling me, yes, let's say you make $1 million, Rich. You know, being in Remax, you're going to make $3 million. And I would say, yeah, but I can't bank on what you're telling me is going to happen. So let's do this. I'll tell you what. If I make the $3 million, I'll be more than happy to pay you back.
Right. Right.
You know, and then we'll go from there. He was like, no, I can't. So I decided at that time, you know, because I wasn't too happy with the whole Exit thing. So I met with, I called Dave. I still remember the day I was in the gym. And I called Dave and I said, look, if you guys would still have an interview with me, I'm looking. And he said, of course, come down and meet Allie. And Allie blew my socks off with the whole Keller Williams. The way she presented it was amazing, the way she did it. She made me feel like I was king of the world of the real estate business. And I came in and it was just a whole different concept that I was willing to be a part of at the time, and it was different. And I remember saying, do I have to pay 2 desk fees at, you know, whatever price? And
Right, because that's what you were used to. Yeah.
yeah. And they were like, no. And I was like, okay, sign me up. And it was the best move for to what I did in life was to go to Keller. It was the best move for me, obviously. But it's strange how we all grew up in the industry, right?
Yep.
And, you know, I came in a lot later than you, not a lot later, but I came in the mid-2000s. And what was it like from the 90s to like 2008? So the 90s, you know, and I remember bits and pieces of it because I was catching the back end of that when you guys still had books, where
Yeah.
computers weren't involved.
Yeah. The
where
MLS
people
books would get delivered to the office.
Remember that? When
Yep.
people would come to you to look for houses, and I believed the way I remember it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, because again, I didn't spend a lot of time on that. I was still a police officer. People came in, but when we looked for our houses, you looked in the Newsday, the Daily News, the New York Times,
Advertising in paper was a big deal.
right? What else?
You would sit and go through the MLS books and then go back to your desk. You'd print out the 1 sheets. Because I remember Prudential, we had 1 printer. So it was hooked up to, it was like the green bars. You would print out whatever houses you needed to make appointments for, and then you would go back to your desk and make appointments. So it's funny, agents think it's hard now. I think it was so much harder then. Like, you had to do so many steps, and we had pagers. So if somebody was looking for you, they would page you, and then you'd have to go to a phone and call them back. It was completely...
Totally different,
Yeah.
right? So when did you start to see things change? When did the MLS, because I still remember, and I'm sure you do too, when we had to drop our paperwork off in Jackson Heights with North Shore.
Right, yes.
Remember North Shore?
Yes.
So if you got to list it in MLS, you had to put it in North Shore and MLS. So you had to do double the paperwork, right? Because you were part of 2 MLSs. And then you had to drop your paperwork off in Jackson Heights. Every
Right.
time you got a listing, you had to go down to Jackson Heights, hope you didn't get a ticket, and run in, drop it off, because they wouldn't let you fax it back then.
It was a lot more work.
It was a lot more work.
It was a lot more work.
But which one did you prefer?
What do you mean, which
like
one?
What, if today's day, would you rather be back in the 80s and the 90s where people were coming to you for business? And again, I know you're making a little bit more money because they needed us a little bit more, because they couldn't look at houses at all without us. At least in my opinion, you
Right.
couldn't. Or would you rather today, with the technology being the way it is, because I know you're a big tech person, so which way would you prefer?
I think way back then, the industry was a little bit more respected. And there's a
You needed
kind-
relationships too.
you did need relationships. You had to know what you were doing. You had to stay on top of the inventory more. You actually looked at what was available every day. So it was a lot more hands-on work for the agent. Now, if you use the technology, it can help you. But I think it also puts more information out into the public, which makes you less significant.
Okay. So
So before, people couldn't go find houses. They didn't have access to the data and stuff by themselves.
they needed you.
They needed you. However, the agents in that environment were more cutthroat.
Okay, because
I think now it's not as cutthroat. I think we're a little bit more respectful to each other because we all have access to the same data.
Yep.
And it's not who gets it first. Now you just have to show more value to the client.
okay, that's fair. I agree with that 100%. So, what made you adapt to the technology the way you did? Why did you? Because a lot of people like me, you know me, I'm not a tech guy.
Because it depends on the way you think. I think less is more. I didn't need to contact a lot of people. And it was funny. When I went to Remax Universal, I felt like it was the commercial where Give It to Mikey. You know, remember that? If,
Sure.
if he didn't want it, I got all the
Mikey
co-ops.
would hate it. Yeah.
I got all the co-ops because the top producing agents didn't want to deal with them.
That's why I did co-ops.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted
So, and I used to cover for David and Nancy before they even came to Remax. So I was familiar with the process. I saw the way they did things. So I always did what everybody didn't want to do because I got good at it. So I would only do co-ops. So anytime a co-op listing came into the office, I would do it. I would take out the buyers. I didn't mind working with buyers. Then I think my husband closed his business with a family, and I almost had a heart attack because I was the only person making money. And that, when you get to that, that's really scary. So, and I was paying $18,000 a year. And I remember Razik telling me, just keep your head down and stay focused and you'll do it. So I lived on this complex. It was a rental complex. One of the tenants there wanted to go see a house in Woodhaven. And back then it was like $800,000, which was
That's a lot of money.
a lot of money back then.
Sure. A lot of money today.
Yeah. Well, now it's first-time buyers are paying $800,000. So we've come a long way. Before that was a high-end house.
That's right.
So I took her back twice, and I was in the office, and the phone rings, and the owner calls me, and she goes, "You're the only agent that came back twice. Would you come and list my house?" I almost died because I never did house before. But the good thing is she didn't know that.
That's right. Yeah.
So I wasn't telling her. So I went and listed the house. And again, with the details, I'm not so sure we had so much technology then, but coming from a Wall Street background, I always kept good paperwork. I accidentally sold the house by myself.
Wow.
So now I had nobody to help me because I was the listing and the selling agent. So you got to figure all that out. When I got that check and I saw the difference between what you got for a co-op versus listing and selling your own house, that changed what I was doing.
Sure. What, back then, 6%, right? 5-6%?
Yes. Yeah.
then.
So I remember, because even now, I don't like being in debt. Rather than pay Remax Universal on a monthly basis, I wrote them the check for the year. And Razik said to me, "Are you sure you want to do this?" But it felt so good to go through a whole year of work and not be stressed about paying a bill, that was my option. So then I started to learn what you couldn't do in real estate. You know, it's like you started with rentals. When I lived on the rental property, my father-in-law was the property manager. So I got paid $50 per apartment to work for the property manager. That was a salary job for me.
Wow.
So I got good at it. And then that's when I was with Prudential, I decided to get my license and start doing sales.
That's so cool. So now, when did you come over to Keller?
So some of the people from Remax Universal left and they went to Keller Williams in Bayside. And they asked me to go, but I didn't want to stay in Queens. By then, I had already bought a house in Massapequa, and I was commuting for 3 years from Massapequa to Queens.
That's right.
Then I would come in, people would cancel their appointments with the traffic, and then we used to have traffic hours, not all day long like we do now. If I didn't leave Queens by 3 o'clock, I knew I'd be sitting in traffic, and I might as well just stay to 7. So with my kids in school, I decided, okay, I'm going to leave Remax Universal. I went to a Remax office out on Long Island. I liked working on Long Island. I still didn't want to go back to Queens. And then I don't know what prompted me, because Dave said to me about coming back to Queens, and I just walked into the Hillside Avenue office.
Well, they didn't.
Helen was the TL.
Helen was the TL, but did I own it?
You were coming. When I went there, Michael Brand was just doing the transition with who used to own it before.
That's right.
That's when I entered.
And then, because I thought Dave introduced me and you. Was it Dave or Nancy?
Well, I'm on Dave's downline,
Yep.
but I don't think he made the intro. One day I just decided to walk in by myself.
Is that what it was?
I don't even know what made me do it. You know, then I just called Dave and said, okay, now I'm with Keller Williams.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Like,
I
he didn't
remember
even know
him-
I was going.
Yeah, I remember me and him having a conversation about that. I just didn't remember how clear it was because that was a while ago. What year was that? That had to be 10 years ago, right?
I'll be with Keller Williams 10 years in May.
Wow.
Yep.
That's
So it's come a long way from a little storefront on Hillside Avenue.
that is crazy,
Like,
right?
you've seen this. So even too, when I was on the ALC and you were looking for commercial space for the Garden City office when we moved from Williston Park, so the ALC went with you to go look at the commercial space, remember? And I did nothing commercial. So then one of my clients calls me and she goes, I'm looking for an office if you see anything. So I remember the places we went to on the ALC, and I said, oh, I saw this really nice office.
That's awesome.
I took her to the office, something that you showed us that we didn't choose, and she said, okay, I'll take it. So I called. We had a commercial person in the office. I didn't know how to do commercial, so I said to him, I go, this is my client, and she wants to rent this office. I don't know what to do.
Probably Ziggy, right?
It was
Ziggy or-
Matt.
Oh, Matt Lana.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
He was with us then. That's
Yes.
So interesting.
yes. So that was my first commercial experience, and then I'm thinking, oh wow, I don't know how to do this, but this is pretty interesting, and I still don't do commercial. But that lady that I took that was looking for office space, then I sold her house in Seaford after that. She bought a horse property out in Central Islip, and I'm now on her board of directors.
Wow.
So the cool thing is now, and like I said, I realize less is more because now I have better relationships. I am very purposeful. I realize I'm not the right click for everybody, but I'm a detail-oriented person. Sometimes that attracts high-maintenance people because the expectations are a little bit higher, but I can meet them. But those relationships always cause me to branch out and do something else.
That's interesting. Well, all right, we got to wrap it up soon because this went by so quick. We have to have you back. I definitely have to have you back. I say this every week. Got to make these things longer. What's your goals for 2025?
I made a personal goal to see if I can break the 500,000 mark. And the only reason being is because I've never done it, and I've gotten to the point in my career where I'm tired of being and doing just enough. So now I want to see if I can knock it out of the park. There's probably, do I have 3 to 5 years left? Maybe. I think when you're doing this for 28 years, people might not want to see you for much longer.
I do. I would.
So I got to start wrapping it up. So I think I'm going to go a little bit bigger.
That's awesome. Well, if there's anything I could do to help, I'm there. Look forward to watching you grow in 25. Definitely going to have you back soon because we have to finish up this conversation. I really did enjoy it. Like I said, time goes by really fast. And we didn't even know what we were going to talk about coming into this, right?
So and it did go by fast,
went by so fast.
Yeah, and I thank you because let me tell you, I sit back and I watch, but I do learn. So I watch what you do. I watch to see how you run a company. And now I just have to be a little bit more proactive.
Well, I appreciate that. I love you.
Thank
Again,
you. Love you too.
Send everybody in your family my love.
Will do.
Talk to you guys soon, and hopefully I see you at family reunion, which I know I will.
Yes. Thanks.
Thank you.